Okay, so it says I'm live. I've decided to start a little early so I can go ahead and share this link. We'll see if it is actually showing up. It doesn't look like it is. Oh, here we go. Okay, so we're a little bit behind. Folks, you'll have to bear with me as I've gone live just a little bit early so I can go ahead and share this. Looks like there are a few people. Hey, Dan, what's up? Like I said, I'm just going ahead and sharing this with everybody. So you have to just bear with me just a little bit here. I ain't bearing with anything. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and share this throughout. So what I'd love to do at some point with everyone is have an honest talk about how much it's going to cost to bury lines, to bury power lines that are already existing above ground here in Connecticut, because that conversation is ongoing at election in November, as I've said before. So I think I'll have to do that another time. Maybe depending how long this runs, if we have time afterwards to do that, we could. Again, I'm just sharing this post with this stream with everybody so I can get as many people to jump in as possible. Yeah, unfortunately, there's no great way to do the type of sharing that I'm doing right now without actually having already gone live. So I'm just sharing this to a number of outlets here. Dan, is there anything you wanted to talk about before we get started here? Oh my God, come on. 68, so. Okay, now you guys have my undivided attention. So let me get exited out of some of these screens so I'm not using up quite so much. Okay, I might actually need that. So I'm not using quite so much bandwidth here. Don't need this. All right, I'll just put that in my history then. So you guys have my undivided attention now. I am hoping to very shortly, hopefully next few days at least, certainly before Tuesday, have a talk about how much it's going to cost to bury lines underground here in Connecticut. So the studies that I've seen from the CGA, so that's the Connecticut General Assembly, suggest that according to 2009 dollars, we're looking at probably $800,000 or more per mile. There are 40,000 miles in Connecticut. Clearly, this is a gigantic cost. And again, this is 2009 dollars, so we're probably talking a substantial lot more than whatever that works out to. It's genuinely tens of billions of dollars, which this state obviously doesn't have. And the reason I want to do this is because this is one of the sales pitches that one of the candidates in my area has been trying to woo us all over with. And I think he's just utterly delusional about that project. So the Connecticut is, in terms of financial solvency, the second least solvent state in the union it's always either number one or number two. According to the 2008 research by the National Bureau of Economic Research, I forget what it was. Connecticut's basically dead last. It's second to last in financial solvency. So no, we don't actually have this money. And get this, folks, when you don't have money for things, you need to prioritize your money. You need to say, what are things that we've got to have, get your finances in order, and only cover those things that we absolutely must have. And again, then once you get your house in order, you can potentially consider other things. So I'm going to actually be going over that research. There's research from other states that seem to indicate, and this is not study that's being done by a utility company. It's being done by the state themselves. There is some research from the state of North Carolina that seems to indicate that, and this is all publicly funded stuff. There is some research that seems to indicate that once the actuaries get to the actual multi-billion-dollar bill, obviously that's not going to be just handed down as an assessment on every single human being in Connecticut. That would get worked out through basically your electrical rate, and we're looking at between doubling and tripling your electric bill, basically in perpetuity. So if you were pissed about the doubling and tripling of your electric bills this summer from Eversource, that seemed fairly arbitrary, wait till we have to bury those lines underground. The other research that I'm seeing is that it seems like the reduction in likelihood of outages is not quite 50%. We can split a hair and call it 50% if you'd like, but that seems like a colossal expense to reduce the likelihood of losing power by 50%, especially when that same research seems to indicate that it's going to be between 4 and 8, probably closest to 6 times as difficult to repair lines that have broken underground than ones that are above. And if Irene Scribala, if you're watching, this is how you identify a power line that's broken above ground. Oh, well, there it is. How do you do it when it's underground? Yes, you have to bring out special equipment. You have to turn off the lines. You have to backfeed DC current, direct current through the line, and then you have to basically use a metal detector. You put on the headphones and put on the line detector, and you run over it. It takes a long time, and it takes extremely expensive equipment, and you have to shut down grid-level power for a huge section in order to find these breaks, which is why you also need a lot more transformers in order to do all of this. And there are ancillary expenses to be considered that aren't really being considered here too, like what to do with the transformers that get erected in places where there is no place to erect a transformer. So like downtown Hartford, it's going to be really difficult. I'm pretty sure their lines are already underground there, but like next to cliff faces, right next to large bodies of water, where do you put these transformers? Next to highly urban communities like downtown Oxford. That part of Connecticut is very urban and the lines are still above grade. So how on earth do you install transformers above grade when there's no place to put them, especially when the load capacity at that point is going to be massive? So these transformers aren't things that you can fit into a briefcase. These transformers are like the size of a wheelbarrow. And for the type that we're talking about when it comes to these high load lines, we're talking about transformers the size of a car. So these are all things that need to be considered. It's all a topic I'd love to have time to go over, that I'll have to do another video on. Maybe I'll just go live and just do a live read of that research. just so that everybody understands what that's like. Craig Miner, by the way, the fact that I'm doing your work for you, yeah, I mean, I think I'm owed a great big thank you. Not a monetary thank you, right? Because I don't want to get in trouble with campaign finance. But Craig, like in all seriousness, we talked about this on our last stream. It is okay to give your opponent, who is the worst political candidate that I can think of. And I actually know this because he was our mayor for 2 years. And we know what his policy looks like. We know what his understanding of the Constitution and of constitutional law looks like. Somehow he's an attorney. I don't know how he gets clients with how badly he reads things like jurisprudence. But Craig, for real, like, it is okay to talk about the bad ideas coming from the other side. It is okay to tell your voters who aren't exactly all that motivated, let's say, here's the crap that we're getting from the other side. This guy that I'm not going to mention, this is the lies that he's spewing. This is the gaslighting that's coming from the other side. So, so that's something I'd like to do before Tuesday when the election comes out. So, yeah, everybody else say it out loud. Go vote for Craig Miner if you're in the Connecticut Senate's 30th district. Excuse me while I dox myself. All right. Yeah, but that's not what they do. Spend. Yep. The party of endless spending. The party that has no understanding of what a limiting principle is. Yeah. So today we're going to be chatting with Destiny. Destiny is his moniker. His real name is Steven Bonnell. And I think that in this conversation, it'd be awkward to call him Destiny. I think he prefers to be called Steven or Steve. I don't know which he prefers between those two, but I'll probably be calling him Steve or Steven. Just because it's kind of awkward to call somebody by their YouTube moniker or their Twitch handle. He streams on Twitch a lot. He has been gotten a boot because of his we'll call them provocative takes. I kind of am on his side when it comes to him getting the boot from Twitch. He should not have gotten the boot from Twitch, in my opinion. He's been fully demonetized. He's one of these people on the left that somehow has managed to get, in certain ways, yeeted. But he has a giant following. And when I say a giant following, I think he's over 200,000 subscribers on YouTube, and that's not his main platform. We're talking like millions of people who are subscribed to him on Twitch. And this is how he makes his income, is debates. Now, I've got a little vignette set up so that when I go on and join Steven, it'll make clear that I'm not necessarily looking to have a debate, because I don't know what his take exactly is on property taxes, but he's offered some takes that, kind of imply a take on property taxes that I can't imagine even he stands for. So what we're going to do is try to explore his take on property taxes and see where he stands and see if that's a reasonable take. So we're going to get a pretty in-depth conversation. I don't know if we'll have time for Q&A. I have a thing at 6:00 that I have to leave for. So that would be 6:00 Eastern or was that 2 p.m.? No. What am I doing? 3 p.m. Pacific. I have no idea what time it is in Arizona, because Arizona switches between Pacific and Mountain Time, which is because they don't observe daylight savings. So I think they're on Pacific right now. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'd have to think about that. So I don't know if Dan's still watching. If Dan could tell us what time what time zone he actually goes by. So this ought to be an interesting conversation, because I'm coming from Connecticut, and I'm going to try not to dox myself. I'm going to try to, and I'm sure Steve will too, try not to dox himself. But the way that property taxes work from state to state varies wildly from state to state. And I think it'll come up during our conversation that what's one of the interesting aspects of property taxes here in Connecticut is that we, for all intents and purposes, don't have counties. The only reason that counties even exist is purely clerical in this state at this point. So what does that mean? That means that when you file your income taxes, I'm pretty sure that individuals filing income taxes in Connecticut, when they fill out the federal form, have to list the county in addition to the town in which they reside. So, the town I live in is in, should I even reveal that county? So let's say we're talking about Hartford. I'm not in Hartford, but let's say we're talking about Hartford. Hartford is in Hartford County. But that's pretty much as far as that goes. There used to be in my lifetime a level of governance that came through the judiciary at the county level. The courts were handled by the counties. That's no longer the case. And at this point, they're kind of, I'm pretty sure they've been entirely subsumed by the state. So there is absolutely no county government whatsoever in our state. And a lot of that county level legislation, a lot of that county level discretion in terms of government has been devolved to the towns. Connecticut is a state where historically a lot of the decision making was devolved to the towns, and actually the state was very directly answerable. Everything that went on in Hartford for a long time was very directly answerable to the towns, and it was argued that this was one of the few states in the Union where the towns had a clear, on paper advantage. That they clearly had more power than the state and had power over the state in a way that just didn't exist in many other states. And it's been a long time since that was the case. This is a very blue state now where Ned Lamont has been afforded executive discretion for far longer than it's. So he declared a state of emergency. So that gives him certain powers, and that extend for about 30. I think it's 30 days after the issuance of the declaration of a state of emergency, and then it needs. Is it the House or the Senate? It needs some sort of legislative approval for those powers to continue. That didn't happen until months after that term expired, and it's been continued pretty much indefinitely. And right now, I talked about the one side not having a limiting principle. There seems to be no end in sight. There seems to be this is why we're affording him, Ned Lamont, these discretionary powers that he wouldn't normally have. And, here's our roadblock. Here's the end of the line. Here's where we draw the line. And that's the point where we're going to withdraw these powers. So I don't know when that's going to end. I don't know what the rationale for that period ending would be coming from the left. Mine would be one on principle. Listen, there's a reason that 30-day window exists. Can we do any of this from the legislative side of things? Can we legislate from the legislature and not from the pen of the executive? I'm not a fan of EOs, and I think that's basically how the state's being run right now. It's just through straight up EO, which is kind of scary. Not sure why I went on that tangent, but yeah. So because here in Connecticut we don't have counties. And historically, a lot of discretion has been devolved to the towns. It's not so much the case anymore. So the way property taxes and mill rates are set here in Connecticut is quite different, I would presume, from where Steven lives out in California. I think he still lives out in California. Pretty sure he hasn't moved I'm pretty sure he hasn't moved out of Southern California. I'm pretty sure he's still in LA. An Omaha boy, born in Nebraska, moved to LA fairly recently, within the last 2 or 3 years, for business reasons, of course, because I guess that's where a lot of the streamers that he associates with were living. There's really no reason to get into further detail than that. So, let's check my mail. Let's see what the update is. It's quarter till. Let me see if he is online. Maybe he's on Twitch instead of YouTube right now. Just gonna search and see if I can find him. Oh, look. Huh. So it looks like he's either not on or he's gone private. AFK or he's private. So I got you guys to myself for just a little bit. Don't forget to join in on chat. If you got some questions, this would be the time to ask them. I'll try to migrate over to Steven shortly. I might have to actually get away from keyboard for just a second to use the bathroom before I get loaded. Before we start loading up our content here. All right, bear with me, folks. I just got to run outside real quick. All right. So I guess as a last minute reminder for everybody, I'll go ahead and plug my other channel here. That's Mike Reads. That's on YouTube. Let me see if I can get a link together for everybody. I just read some Sal today. So that video will be coming up on Sunday. So if you are into reads on economics and the like, this is a channel I recommend you guys check out and subscribe to. It's kind of a growing channel for me. It's growing actually kind of gangbusters right now. So if you guys want to check that out, that's a place to get some reading done. Join in me with some reads. I've got some live reads on there. Got some analytics. Got some book reviews. It's pretty much just a channel that I run that's, just a books channel. Mike Reads, I think, is a pretty self-explanatory title. I find books that I like. I read them. Sometimes I read them on screen. Sometimes I read them on the side, and then do a review of them. Tom Sowell actually has a book, that just came out that I've got on order from Amazon. I did just finish American Secession by F.H. Buckley, not W.H. Buckley, Frank Buckley. And I'll be doing a review of that shortly. We've got an ongoing parallel series on Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson and Thomas Sowell's Economic Facts and Fallacies. Our third read in Chapter 2 I just finished, and the analysis and review section of that, of course, is at the end of the read, as we always do. And that video will be out Sunday, so you guys can go and check into that as well. Do I teach people to read? I need help. No kidding, Dan, huh? Ain't that the truth? All right, so let me see if I can reach Steven here. I just sent him a message. Yeah, you'll have to bear with me here, folks. It looks like he's AFK right now. Let's see if AFK has some people in it. No. All right, maybe I'll just reach out to his administrator, see how things are going. Yeah, pretty sure we said October 30th at 4 o'clock Eastern. 4 p.m. Eastern, yep. We are right about there. Just seeing if we can get here. So I guess he's not responding to anything right now. Well, I hate to disappoint everybody. I don't know if this is going to happen at this point because it seems like he's not responding. So we had a nice long email exchange, and I'll read the email exchange now at this point because I don't know what's going on, Steve. I don't know why you've agreed to have me on to chat with me about this and are bailing, apparently. But this is the first thing I wrote, and it was to Destiny's email on his page. Stephen, Mike here. I've heard a bunch of your thoughts on thoughts over several streams on property taxes. It seems like your generic view on property taxes, if taken to its logical end, leads to an economic system I don't think you'd support. It's entirely plausible that I've read your take wrong, but I'd love to have a genuinely nuanced, in-depth, good faith chat to suss out exactly what your thoughts are on property taxes, and let me know the best way to schedule something. That was October 20th, 2020 at 3:26 p.m. This is the response. Hello, Mike. If you can please provide information on your qualification and availabilities, we can potentially schedule time for you to talk about how thoughts on property taxes can lead to certain economic systems. That was sent to me on October 21st, 2020 at 5:20 a.m. So I responded with, sure, availability. Then I listed my availability, qualifications, listed my qualifications. So I'd like to suss out exactly what his position is and see how well he understands the process. And this really can't be done unless there's a real-time conversation to dig this all out. And it's important to do because, as I've stated, I'm not sure he'd actually support a taking of positions on to their logical end if he properly understood the result. Looking forward to our chat, Mike. And that was sent October 21st at 11:27 a.m. The response is, would Friday, October 30th at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, which it is right now, work for you? Thank you. Administrative Assistant Destiny. So, and then I responded, that was October 21st, 2020 at 10 p.m., 10:18 p.m. I responded with, I have a DMV appointment in the morning, but and I'll just TLDR this. Yes, but I'll be at the DMV in the morning, so watch your emails. Cheers. Mike. That was October 22nd, 2020 at 10:14 a.m. Destiny responded, thank you. You've been scheduled for Friday, October 30th at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Please respond if you require any further assistance. That was October 20th, 2020, 4:52 a.m. My response was, thank you. Just need whatever technical information is necessary to quote-unquote join in with Steve. That was October 24th, 2020 at 1:06 p.m. And then the response from Destiny was, he prefers Discord. Do you have an account name and hashtag he can add for the discussion? and I do, of course. That was sent to me on October 25th, 2020 at 9:10 p.m. And my response is yes. However, I'm not at the computer right now. I'll send you the information in the morning. That was just after midnight, October 26th. So in the morning, I said my handle in Discord is msinello number 6534. As my handle contains my last name, if you would consider it advisable to get a new one for Friday's conversation, then I would be happy to do so this afternoon and get back to you as soon as I've gone through all that. That was October 26th, 2020, 1:40 p.m. And then the final email I gotten from them, it's up to you, but not necessary. If you choose to, go to user settings, my account, and then edit username. Thank you. October 28th, 2020, 3:21 a.m. That was 2 days ago. So I sent him a message about an hour ago now. Decided not to change the username. Let me know which voice lobby would be most preferable. Should be ready fairly soon. And I have been sitting in General Lobby 2 now for a little over half an hour. So, Steven, I'm not sure what's going on here. Maybe your admin has dropped the ball, but I'm not sure exactly what is going on here. I see that you're live on Twitch right now. What's funny is that his schedule has him going live at exactly 4 o'clock. I think do you have me unmuted? Hello. Steve, do I have you? Yeah. All right. I just got to. I just want to let you know that I am actually streaming this, just so you know, so I don't doesn't.
Oh yeah, no problem.
All right. All right, and I do have to fix some things because I was trying to reach out to you for a while, so I just got to close some windows here where I was trying to reach out to you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, so I got a little bit of an opening vignette. If you don't mind me reading, it take me about 80 seconds to read, just to get us started, because the topic, of course, for today is property taxes.
Okay.
All right, so I'll try to blow through as fast as I can. I don't know how much you've seen of the conversation with your email admin that I've been having, but I've been trying to frame this as a chat rather than a debate. The reason I've framed our conversation today as a chat rather than a debate is because I'd rather suss out what exactly your general take on property taxes is, so that if I disagree, I can debate you and your positions rather than a straw man. You're here now. I can debate you now. I don't need to debate a straw man. That said, the takes you've given over the past few weeks seem to imply a position on property taxes generally that, if taken to its logical end, doesn't align with your take on other topics, especially within the realm of economics, and seems to imply a failure to comprehend how things like mill rates are set and how easy it is to utterly destroy a community when it comes to the process of establishing property taxes, both absolute and relative. And this is why I think it's important to suss out exactly what your position actually is. I've been wrong before. I'll probably be wrong again. I could easily have misread your take on property taxes. So on that note, let's hear the 3-minute, let's say, opening arguments version, if you will, on how you view property taxes. This isn't a 30,000-foot view, nor is it the quantum view. I'm looking for something somewhere in between. And feel free to unload at full Destiny speed. Go ahead.
Wait, okay, hold on, wait, real quick before we do this. Wait, can you tap your mic for me 2 times?
Yeah, give me 1 second. All right.
Did you tap your mic?
Yes. Oh, you mean to
Okay.
literally tap the mic itself?
Yeah, tap the mic itself, yeah. Okay, wait, can you, on Discord, can you click your audio settings? Do you have 2 mics on your computer? I think it might be using a different mic.
Audio setting, voice and video.
And then on input, check the microphone.
Oh, all right. All right. Then.
Okay. Holy shit. Yes. Okay.
Sorry,
went
Steve.
From the fucking 1980s to the 2020s. All right. Hello?
Yep. Do you want me to go through that again, or did you hear it well?
No. I heard it. It sounded like you were on a phone that flipped. Okay. So you want me to just briefly outline, I guess, like why I'm in favor of property taxes, I guess?
Well, okay, that's one position already that you've offered. You are in favor generally of property taxes.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
To what extent are they like an a prioristic, good, neutral, or bad?
It seems like a relatively easy tax to collect, in that it's easy to levy, and then it's easy to allocate. Like you can put those taxes can be put locally if you want them, and then it seems like it scales relatively well with wealth. Wealthier people are going to own more expensive property, so they can pay more taxes. And I think that's generally why I'm in favor of it. I'm not like dogmatically married to it. I guess like, for instance, if somebody were to say, well, what if we just raised the individual rates and we got rid of property taxes? Like, okay, I'd probably be okay with that, I guess, sure. But yeah.
Okay, do you make a distinction between relative and absolute?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're 2 different things, right? I would have to.
Well, do you make a moral distinction between the two?
With respect to what, I guess.
So the way I'm sure you're aware of this, the way property taxes are handled is usually at a municipal or county level, and that means that the way that they're handled varies wildly from state to state and even from county to county, even within certain states. I live in Connecticut. Here we, for all intents and purposes, don't have counties, so property taxes are handled entirely by the municipal. So,
Gotcha.
In the town that I live, there are certain special tax districts, which is like basically communities that have gotten together and said that on top of the mill rate that you'd be paying, which is a relative tax, there are certain other taxes that you're going to have to pay as a result of living in this community. So, in the case of there's one community that's like on a lake, and they have like a community access to the lake. They have their own beach and everything. And of course, this takes money to maintain. It's basically collected through a tax. In that case, it's an absolute tax. So you're not paying a percentage, you're paying just a fee for all intents and purposes. And I don't know if there's any community out there that has a tax that is an absolute number, or does their taxes in such a tiered system that it effectively creates an absolute system. So I was wondering if you make a moral distinction between relative and absolute taxes in that respect.
Gotcha. So just to get, I guess to be using consistent tax terminology, are we talking about the difference between like a progressive scaling tax or something versus like a flat tax or something?
No, if you would like to opine on that too as well. So you know what a mill rate is, right?
I've heard the term before, but I can't off the top of my head.
I'll explain it. So mill in this case is etymologically related to the prefix mill, so 1,000.
Yeah.
So a mill rate is a number over 1,000. So in the case of your property taxes on your home, generally speaking, how that's done is there's a mill rate. Let's say it's 20. If the mill rate is 20, it's not 20 per 100. It's 20 per 1,000. So if you have a $200,000 home, either in terms of its assessed value or its appraised value, however you want to go about that, the annual taxes you would pay would be $4,000.
Gotcha.
So that would be a mill rate. So it's a tax relative to a thing, as opposed to the one I described before, which is just if you own property and want to be part of this district, you pay $600 a year in addition to that 4,000.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. So then, okay. So what was the first question then that you feel like I didn't fully answer?
Oh,
The
okay.
difference between relative versus absolute tax.
Not do you understand it? Do you make a moral distinction between the two?
Yeah, I guess I still think I would. Yeah.
In what manner?
Um, so, okay, wait. I'm sorry. I haven't heard the difference between relative and absolute. So can you give me that first example one more time?
The absolute version?
Yeah.
Okay.
When you're talking about the county for funding the like a lake related thing.
Yeah. So like let's say you live on the lake. In this particular community that's on the lake, they have access to they basically purchase property as part of the community for the lake,
Gotcha.
so that they have a beach. And everyone else lives across the street because it's kind of a weird, the way it's set up. There's no way to build a house right up on that water. So yeah. So in that case, instead of paying a percentage of your property's assessed or appraised value to have access to that, you pay an absolute dollar amount. So it's a number no matter how much your house is worth, and it goes through the town and then goes towards the tax district.
Gotcha. And that absolute value would be paid by everybody that has access to the beach or everybody in the town?
Everybody in that specific special tax district. It's usually only a handful of people.
And that special tax district are the people that have access to the waterfront property or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, there's other things that it could go towards. For example, there's a fire department that's it's a volunteer fire department, so it's not run by the town. And then there's certain you can be part of that tax district, and there's certain things that affords you that go on top of just putting out fires.
Yeah, I got you. Okay. Okay. I'm trying to make sure I understand, because it seems like the answer has to be yes. So the difference would be like there is some flat dollar amount that everybody pays regardless of the price of their home or income or anything else, versus like a tax that's levied that's based on the price of your property or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Then there is a distinction. Yeah, there must be. Yeah. Okay. And then, yeah. Do you need me to elaborate on that further? Or
yeah, sure. Elaborate on the moral distinction you make between the two.
The moral distinction that I make between the two. So, okay, I got to back up. We got to back up a lot here. So generally, if I was to call on somebody to contribute to a community, I think I would want their contribution to a community to be relatively proportional to another person's. I don't think that we ought to be forcing some members to share a disproportionate burden to take care of a community versus other people without good reason. So for instance, a firefighter or a police officer might serve their community more, depending on how you look at it, but like they're opting to do that for a job. So if I believe that everybody is called upon in an equivalent manner to serve their community, if I believe that, then the next question is, what dollar amounts should they be contributing in order to serve their communities in a tax sense and in an equitable way, I guess. On the face of that, it seems like a defense of absolute values of taxes. Everybody ought to contribute $1,000 to a community. That's an equal calling on everybody. But if we look at how marginal utility works, then we understand that $1,000 from somebody that makes $1 million a year is not the same as taking $1,000 from somebody that makes $100,000 a year. So in that sense, relative taxes or proportional or progressive taxes, I guess, if it gets higher as you make more income, is probably a more equitable way to call upon everybody to contribute evenly to a given tax system to contribute to their community. Okay. I think that's how I would view that. So I would view relative taxes as probably being more moral than absolute taxes, because I'm resting on two assumptions. One, that everybody is called to make an equal contribution, and two, that the same dollar amount can mean a different thing to somebody depending upon how much money they make. Okay, but yeah, there. Is that good?
Sure. All right. So you brought up another distinction to be made, and that is a progressive the progressive tax rate. So that's one where it's the rate itself is lower, depending on a thing, however we want to build that hierarchy. And at the higher end of that hierarchy, the tax rate is higher. So would you be in favor of a progressive property tax rate?
I don't see a reason why I wouldn't be.
Do you want to expand on that?
Well, based on what I just said, if I believe that, I guess we didn't technically, well, yeah. So if I believe in things like marginal utility, And if I believe that people have houses that can be significantly more expensive, or property can be significantly more expensive than others, then it's also possible that they can afford a slightly higher tax rate than somebody with a much smaller property. Although we're talking about a percentage of a tax based on an asset rather than like their total income. I don't think I have a strong opinion on it. I don't see why I would outhandedly be against it. I don't know if I would 100% say, we should have it. If somebody has $1 million house, could they pay a 10% property tax? And if somebody has a $100,000 house, can they pay a 5% property tax? Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think I could be moved either way on that. I think that might just come down empirically at the end of the day to how I'd feel about things, I guess.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of other conditions to consider when we're setting a property tax system, especially at the municipal level. Maybe there's some sort of outside factor contributing to that decision. So I kind of understand what you're saying. And I'm assuming your moral outrage, if you were to pick a side, would be like 1 out of 10.
Yeah, this wouldn't be that much of a moral thing at all. Well, okay, because there would be other moving cogs in this. So let's say, for instance, if we were to have an incredibly progressive income taxation system, and that was set at a way where there was zero more outrage for me, I don't know if I would need there to be a very progressive property taxation system, because any amount of like extra tax dollars I would want to get from an extremely wealthy person would be accounted for in the income tax, I guess. So that's why I don't really feel too strongly one way or another, I guess.
Okay. Do you believe that a rate could be established that would be too high?
For like a progressive rate, or just a rate period?
Just a rate period. You can go ahead. And you can go ahead and conceive of your own conditions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a rate would become too high. I'm trying to think if there would be like a moral qualm that I'd have here, or if it would just come down empirically to some condition that I would want to avoid. So obviously, if we were to set rates such that no one could afford property, or property were to become prohibitively expensive to people such that they couldn't live or rent in an area, then that would be bad, obviously. And then if a rate were so low that taxes weren't being collected such that they could adequately fund things like education, then that would also be negative as well. So I guess there's some curve here where I'm looking at like an optimal amount of tax collection that doesn't negatively impact housing consumption.
So it sounds like you're describing a moral neutral, and that it being good or bad is conditional.
Yeah, in and of itself, like this particular thing, the tax itself, I view as a means to an end. I don't view that as like a moral tool, I guess, in and of itself.
Okay, so you would be in favor of abolishing a property tax under certain, probably extraordinary conditions.
Yeah, I'm not like, I don't care that much about them. Right now, they seem to have a place in our system, chiefly because they seem to fund like local things, especially like education in most areas. So that's generally why I'm in favor. But I mean, if we replace that tax revenue from other places, then yeah, I'm not like.
Okay, so then what do you think is the appropriate role of property taxes? And let me expand on that just a little bit. I'm sure you're aware that property taxes as a process are handled at a very, very minute level. So that would be in Connecticut, where I live, at the municipal level, and beyond that at the local tax district level, if there's a tax district specific to that. In California, you're in California, right?
For 2 years now, yeah. I've never owned property here, though, only in Nebraska.
Okay, how specific can you be about your location without doxing yourself?
I live in Huntington Beach. People dox me all the time. So fuck
it. Okay. Yeah, well, I'm a little kind of a nobody, so I kind of don't want to.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah. So all right. So I could look into that, I guess. Is that a suburb of LA?
It basically everything in Southern California except for San Diego is a suburb of LA. But I live like an hour south of LA. Yeah.
All right. So I think that's handled then. I think you have both a municipal and a county tax. Do I have that right?
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know the 15 different levels of government taxation levy. I do know that in California, it's incredibly fucking high. But yeah.
Oh, all right. Okay. Yeah. Cause I did look up Prop 13, and that is some bizarre stuff. And we'll probably get into that at the end here. Mm-hmm. Bizarre to say the least. Like it or don't like it, it's still weird. Yeah. So at the municipal level here, oh God, I forgot where I was going with this actually. So let's just move on then. The role of property taxes. So, for instance, in Connecticut, the role of property taxes is to fund municipal endeavors. So that would be like we have in Connecticut, there's a separate budget for the Board of Education and the rest of the municipality. In the town that I live in, we vote on those two things separately. So if one passes at referendum, the other then that passes, and if the other one fails, then you go back and revisit that one, and not all right. So the state has basically no say in how property taxes are handled in the town I live in. So
Okay.
I think that's probably my personal take is just briefly that's probably the appropriate way to do this. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the role of property taxes and where that should be handled.
In terms of should they be handled like on the most local level possible, basically?
Well, you can go. I said role, so you can define role however you'd like. That seems to me part of that definition.
What? Okay, so part of my confusion, and if I'm in terms of answering these questions, just to be really clear, is so if you're asking me how things ought to be, if you're asking me for like a prescriptive statement, how should we
Sure.
run things?
Prescriptive, not descriptive.
Yeah, there's two different things that I have to consider here. So one is how would it work in like my perfect world, and then the other thing
all right.
is
In reality,
is how should it work in the reality? Yeah, because I think I haven't thought about this too much because obviously I don't have my perfect tax world. I think in my perfect world, it might literally be that the only tax that exists might be like a VAT and an income tax that are like highly like specialized and targeted. Like those two things might be the only taxes I think that like a very complicated society might need. That if you could levy these with enough precision, you don't really need any other taxes. Maybe I think. So when you're asking me how things should be, I think I'm trying to give you an answer that works within our current system. But that might contradict a later answer if you ask me like, what do you think is the perfect way to do something? And I might give you something that's totally different, just so it doesn't feel like I'm trying to weasel back and forth, right?
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Just so we're clear. So, so when you ask me, how do I think taxes should be handled? It seems to me that the role of property taxes right now is typically to fund like local governments, especially things like I think education is most commonly tied to property taxes. So those should probably be like the rates and everything should be set. The taxes collected at the local level would be my feeling. That seems to be how the best way to work it on our system right now. That seems to be appropriate.
All right. Are you familiar with how it's done in Huntington Beach?
I have no idea. No.
All right.
Like I said, I don't. The only property I own is in Nebraska. I don't own property, and I just pay rent.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, it's something I'm very familiar with here because I personally find local politics more interesting than national politics, but I'm sure I'm in the minority on that.
Unfortunately, yeah, because local politics are
much more impactful,
probably more important. Yeah,
yeah, much more impactful. And if you're going to allow me to make a quick plug at the end, that's kind of what I would have said. That November 3rd is only 4 days away. You've got 4 days to cram because the local stuff is more impactful than the federal stuff.
Yeah, the ironic thing is that what everybody's been protesting recently, the police stuff or whatever, like you're not like federally, you're not going to ever really be able to do much about that. Like that's like 95% like your local precincts and everything. But yeah, okay, go for it. Or what was the next?
So I'm trying to suss out your position because you haven't talked about it much, which I'm not like blaming you for. It's just you haven't talked about it much. It seems like a relevant topic.
Yeah, I don't know if you've noticed or not in following policy conversations, but it feels like almost nobody knows anything about taxes, especially like politicians when they talk about it. I can't tell if they don't know or if they just don't get into the weeds on it. But so yeah, I don't have too many in-depth conversations, I guess, on like tax policy.
Yeah, well, so we talked about the rates themselves, and the reason that I asked you about if there is such a thing as too high a rate is because in my town, at least, the process of establishing the mill rate, the process of setting and collecting taxes in this town is an entirely political one. And that's not to say a partisan one. There's no legislative involvement in any of this. It's not like, for example, if you had a mayor who was a nefarious actor, let's say, and he appointed a finance department director who was a nefarious actor. So we're only up to 2 people in on this scheme. That finance director could set a mill rate of, let's say, 1 quintillion %, some preposterous fantasyland number. And the mill rate itself is pretty much limited to just a vote on the Board of Finance and the town council. So that means that if you get a majority, and it's not a necessary vote in the Board of Finance, which means that if the chairman of the Board of Finance decides not to vote on it, then it doesn't come up. So then it becomes 5 people on town council, and then those 2 people could really destroy a town with something like this. So that's why I brought that up, because I think if there was an a prioristic moral good position here, taking that to its logical end means that you could have a tax rate that's so insane, and you really could get these utterly ridiculous rates that the town just becomes an overnight ghost town. Like,
Sure.
and that's, and it was sounding like in some of your takes, and let me see if I have this read correctly, and I'm happy to admit I'm wrong. But it seems like your take on somebody thinking that property tax rates were too high was, we'll just move. And if there's a property tax rate that's too high, one of the opposite positions would be to be outraged and then to vote in people who are going to lower that rate.
Sure.
So please,
Are you aware of like just to be super ultra clear, and again, I want to clarify this now, so this is I'm weaseling out of a take later.
all right,
You sound like you're familiar with Prop 13 in California.
kind of. I read it this afternoon.
Okay.
And the text is, so I'll say this: your description of it isn't perfectly accurate, but
Gotcha.
that's not to say that your take is. I think if we actually read the text, and I think it'd be something cool for you to do on your channel here, is to read the actual text. I don't think if you read the text, it would make it look better. I think it would make it look worse.
Okay, so and I haven't read the actual text of Proposition 13, so I could be totally wrong. To give you my understanding of it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding of Prop 13 is that it basically limits or caps the amount of tax that you have to pay on property, so that it doesn't continue to scale with how much the property is worth. Essentially, is that
not quite?
How off am I? Yeah, go hit me up with it.
You're not off by too much, but there's a lot beyond that that's not being considered here.
Go for it.
So first things first, caveat, I am not familiar with legal precedent. So, a literal reading of the text is all I can go by. I am not familiar with the California Civil Code or with the general statutes. So I don't know if there's some other statute that has any influence on this. So I'm just going to go off a literal reading of the text. Sure. So what it does is remember how I told you there was a mill rate?
Yeah.
Well, it sets, with some exceptions, that mill rate maximum of 20. To give you an idea of what that's like, I live in Connecticut. I would imagine, you could probably imagine that cost bases and income levels are pretty much identical between California and Connecticut. So our mill rate here is the lowest it's been in a while, and that's at 28. So
okay, gotcha.
So it caps it at 20 or 2%. And then on top of that, it says, so do you know the difference between an appraisal rate and the appraised value and an assessed value?
I think when I get my escrow statements in Nebraska, I'm pretty sure the assessed value is what I pay taxes on, because I get like the Douglas County assessor, I think, sends me something every 6 months. I think you can correct me if I'm not sure. Go ahead.
Okay, well, so the difference, some counties don't make this distinction, but the difference is that the assessed value is based on a number actually paid, and the appraised value is an estimate of current market value. So if you bought your home for $200,000, that would be the appraised value. If we were looking at that would be the assessed value.
Okay, gotcha.
And the appraised value would be a look at what that would be worth today. So one's an estimate, one's based on an actual number, like it or not. The other thing so like when you are forced to make a sewer connection, right? Because the town's expanding its sewer line, for example, and you're forced to join into that. That's why it's called an assessment, because the $30,000, let's say you're forced to pay, is the assessed value of that.
Okay. So do you pay? Are your property taxes based on your appraised value then?
Here it is.
Gotcha.
So so we're talking about Prop 13. So they do some sort of weird hybrid. So what they do is they say, when the home was purchased, you don't pay your property tax based on the dollar amount. So that would be the assessed amount. They say when your home was purchased, you pay the appraised, you pay upon the appraised value. So normally what happens in a place like where I live, there are things that trigger an appraisal that don't have to be the sale of a home. And they do every 10 years, they do a town-wide appraisal, regardless of how long you've been in that home. Okay. So California's Prop 13 does kind of a hybrid, and I think it takes kind of the worst of both worlds in doing that.
Gotcha. Okay. Go ahead.
There was one other thing. There was one other really important distinction to be made. I'll think of it in a minute. Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. The just move take I had in regards to taxes wasn't like a general like property taxes should be set so high that they're forcing people out. It was more so that it felt like Prop 13 feels like a way to disproportionately favor people that already owned property that for whatever reason couldn't afford the taxes on them, and they found a way to basically lower those tax rates to favor those old homeowners that weren't able to pay the tax or whatever. So that's what I was talking about specifically when I was like, maybe these people need to move, because we're distorting the fuck out of a housing market by hyper incentivizing home ownership in a place where home ownership is already like very, very hard to do because there's not very much property available. There's not very much land available. And you're ruining your tax base at the same time. So it seems to like accomplish like the worst of every possible world. You're favoring people that tend to be wealthy and are in an area first. You are lowering your tax revenue by arbitrarily capping, arbitrary, I guess all taxes are arbitrary, but by capping like the amount you can tax something.
It's arbitrary. It's not based on anything. I looked into it. It's just we like 20.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So more arbitrary than most tax numbers, sure. And then you are incentivizing like overconsumption of a good that is already like in high demand that is absolutely limited. The land in California, yeah.
So that seems like a pretty utilitarian take on that, because I mean, I think the more moral approach is to tie a revenue source to an expense. So that means that.
Go ahead.
So not in terms of like business, of course, but like in terms of government, how government should run. Here in where I live, again, the setting of the mill rate is an entirely political process, but the convention has been to try to cover costs, and that's it.
Yes, that's how I think taxes ought to be set. I agree with that. So my tax preferences, the utilitarianism of them, the utility that I'm typically trying to serve is fulfilling a budget, basically.
All right.
If you feel like that contradicts anything I said, then we can talk.
Well, see, Steve, this is why I said I want to have a chat. I don't want to have a debate because it's entirely plausible that my interpretation of your take was wrong. It sounds like it was, at least to some degree, wrong. I mean, yeah, maybe. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, usually when I'm talking about moving because of taxes, I'm almost exclusively talking about my anger with how California sets, how Prop 13 like limits property taxes because of everything related to housing policy in the entire U.S., but especially in California is so absurdly fucking stupid.
Well, I mean, this is why, Steve. This is exactly why I think these things should be devolved to the lowest common level. Like the towns know what they need to do. Let the towns do what they need to do when it comes to property taxes.
So this is something that I actually disagree with. And I don't know, maybe you could enter here. I don't know. The property taxes seem like something that almost need to be set at like an authoritarian dictatorship level because citizens or homeowners voting on property related things seem like they're never going to vote to screw themselves over. So I'm vaguely referring to like NIMBYism here, kind of, and then everything that goes along with that. That like if I have like a city full of homeowners and we're talking about things like property taxes, like why would they ever vote to raise property taxes themselves? Why would they ever vote to repeal Prop 13? Like this favors the existing population so much.
Okay, so would you prefer then a republicanist? I don't even know how to say this. A Republican system. So that's kind of what we have here, where there are there's a small body of elected officials who perform this duty, and they're elected very often. So if somebody does, like I said, just you get 5 or 6 people that establish a quintillion% tax rate, the way you get rid of them, the way you say, whoa, hold the brakes there, is you vote them out of office, which happens every other year. So, I mean,
are you asking me if I think that like a more representative form of government would be able to set these taxes more appropriately? Or
you said authoritarian, so the system I basically described, would that be more preferable to a direct democracy?
I think having a representative system, I don't see how it would help. People would just continue to vote for the people that just give them the most preferable tax rates, it seems.
And you don't think that we'd reach some sort of like Nash equilibrium here? That if the town wants to run themselves into the ground, they can run themselves into the ground?
Well, ideally, it sounds bad, I guess, as a liberal and as an American, but ideally we don't usually want to give people those types of choices exactly. Like if we understand that people respond predictably to certain economic incentive and we understand that people can be a little bit distorted in their thinking, I don't know if letting people set their own tax rates like that is necessarily the best way to go about things. Like, I don't know if I want to give a community the chance to maybe you can give some strong arguments to me, but I feel like Prop 13 is just an absolutely absurd piece of legislation, a ballot initiative. Like I can't believe that exists. And that is only something so stupid that it could come from voters. So yeah, I don't know.
Oh, okay. So it sounds like you agree with me then, actually. So
it
what
should
happened?
Be like a representative kind of thing.
So what happened with Prop 13 is that it went to referendum.
Yeah, but
So
yeah, ballot initiative. Yeah.
right, so that's an initiative of direct democracy at a state
Yeah.
level.
Hmm.
So you would suggest that if this was happening at a municipal level, which is more what I'm only bringing this up at a municipal level because that's what I'm more familiar with, um,
Okay.
that you would prefer that it not go to referendum and it either be handled by unilaterally by one person or by a small elected body.
Man, I don't know. No, it's almost to the point where I'm making arguments for like technocracies, but that's a huge pivot. I like the idea that the Federal Reserve operates as its own autonomous body because I would not want people whose elections depend on the economic well-being of this country to be setting the rates in the Federal Reserve. That would scare me. So much the same way, if we had a body of elected people, I don't know if I would want them to be able to directly mess with the tax rates on like in such a way that it is like influencing how people vote for them. But I guess you can have to. Um, I don't know. It's a hard one. I wish that I wish that there was like a committee of people that put together like kind of like the CBO maybe that put together like budget proposals or looked at things and said like, hey, we should set this tax rate for this or that or this to accomplish these measures, and then that's what
Okay,
people would
so
vote
like an
on. I guess that's what I
advisor.
would.
Okay, so like
Yeah,
an advisory board rather than an actual policy board.
yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So you would have this technocracy of advisory agents rather than people actually establishing some sort of tax rate. They're the ones that say, "Here's the recommended tax rate we're going to vote on."
Basically, yeah, almost like the little committees and subcommittees in Congress and the House and Senate, I guess. Yeah, something like, yeah, here's this. We've got like 2 or 3 proposals in front of us, and this is what we can vote on. This will allow us to fund that or that, rather than like 20 is good for taxes. LOL, like something dumb like that. Yeah.
So I understand your take with the Federal Reserve. Do you think that take changes in any way when we're talking about, say, a town of less than 1,500? Like if they all vote unanimously that they want a thing, and it doesn't affect anyone else around them, let's say.
They all vote unanimously. So hypothetically, we construct a town of 1,500 people. 99% of these people vote. They all have an input. If they want a particular thing, what right do I have to impose on that group of people that are all voting? Assuming they're all relatively well informed.
I get what you're doing, Steve. I get what you're doing, Steve. But in reality, seriously, in these tiny towns in Connecticut, you get really high turnout rates for stupid stuff like this.
Oh yeah, no. I'm constructing the analogy to be as fair as possible so we can get to the moral root of the thing, right? So basically, we're saying that like if we have a town, everybody's voting, there's no obvious corruption or whatever, is it morally right for me to say you guys can't impose a given tax rate even if every single one of you was informed on it and in favor of it? It would seem to me that in that case, I would have to acquiesce and say, yeah, you can, yeah, I guess so. But then it becomes a level of like, well, where do you draw that line, I guess, right? Is where we would go next.
Okay, so you say in the case of 100%, yeah, whatever. And then you're saying that below that, we've got to figure out what that threshold is. So like the town of 1,500.
Are you talking about voter participation or?
Right. So let's say we got that town of 1,500, right? And let's say all 1,500 people are perfectly informed on a thing that doesn't affect anyone outside of these 1,500 people, whatever that might be. All right. And then on top of that, they all turn out to vote and they all vote in favor of the thing. In the case of small towns, this is often like a flag bill. You know what a flag bill is, right?
Is that just what's interesting that like a ballot initiative or whatever?
Oh, a flag bill is a descriptor. So a flag bill is like a bill that nobody's going to vote against. And the reason it's called a flag bill is because we've got a bill before us to spend $50 to replace a flag on this flagpole. No one's voting against that.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
So I'm just giving an example of something that like you're going to get basically that number for.
Yeah. Okay, so I think something that I would tie into this discussion that I would think about. So a similar question can be asked about voting away rights guaranteed to you in the Constitution. I think this is a question that people ask about sometimes. If a city full of like 1,000 people were to all vote away like their First Amendment rights, should they be allowed to do that particular thing? And then I think the most common argument I think in counter to that is that there should be some level of civil rights or some level of like federally guaranteed rights that people can't revoke.
Can I stop you? Can I stop you, Steve? Because
go for it.
In order to have that part of the conversation, we're going to have to move on to some much greater, much deeper philosophical conversation about where rights come from and the role of the federal government in protecting those rights. So let's pick something more mundane. Can we please just pick something more mundane?
Can somebody sell themselves into slavery, I guess, is like the fundamental question on that.
I understand that. But what I'm saying is, can we, for this topic, and since we're talking about property taxes, which is fairly mundane, We're not talking about selling somebody into slavery. Can we pick something that's a little bit more mundane so we don't have to branch out into that much deeper philosophical conversation? Let's say it is just a flag bill, something where it's
Well,
definitely not going to affect anyone outside of those communities.
sure. So in terms of, we're still talking in terms of like setting property tax rates?
Yeah. I mean, I'm giving
Or
you. Are you keeping a notepad file of our topics here?
no, but I'm think I'm following along. I haven't had to write
All right.
anything down
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah. Because I don't know if I'm pivoting here,
No,
and I
you're
don't know
fine.
if we're pivoting here. And I know that you do that sometimes. You keep track of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I probably should be doing it myself, but I'm not. So the question was something along the lines of you suggested that we should have basically a technocracy that acts as an advisory panel to recommend a tax rate that gets voted on, either by representatives, which is what you'd probably see in something like New York City, where it's going to be impossible to get something like that.
Every single person voting, yeah.
Yeah. Or by direct democracy, which is what you have in very, very small towns here in Connecticut, where almost everything has to go to what's effectively a referendum. So the question then became, should outsiders have any involvement with a tax rate if there's basically or is unanimity in that tax rate for property taxes? That was asking the question. Are you thinking about it? Or?
Yeah.
All right.
It seems like as long as nobody is getting like fucked over, it seems like that like an outside force shouldn't have the ability to influence that, I guess. Yeah, I think that's what I was saying. Yeah, so like that should be left to like a local level, I guess, as long as
Which actually lines you up with Prop 13, with your position. Sorry, on Prop 13.
Sure.
Right. That why is this outside body bringing in these rules that towns have no control over? Well, not no control over. There are exceptions.
So to be clear, this lines me up with people having the right to vote on Prop 13, which I never disagreed with. But I think that Prop 13 in and of itself is stupid. That's all I was
going for.
If a city or municipality or whatever wants to vote itself into financial ruin or harm or whatever, I guess they should have the right to do so. That's part of, I mean, you should have the right to do so. But I could still disagree with the particular decisions you make, right?
Yeah. Okay. So let's go on a little bit further here.
Go for it.
Let's see. Okay. So do you think that the particular type of property that's being taxed should be considered for the rate? So you're clearly in favor of some sort of variable rate because you prefer, you said you prefer a progressive tax. How about a system of taxation at the local level where commercial property, since you're allowed to do certain things, is taxed at a different rate from residential or industrially zoned property? What are your thoughts on that?
Something that you said earlier is typically how I view tax rates. I think that taxes should be set to achieve some end, that taxes in and of themselves are not necessarily necessary or moral. So if for instance, if we were to say that property taxes, hypothetically, let's say that property taxes fund schools in a district, then I don't know if like commercial property taxes should go to the same thing. Or if commercial property taxes fund like commercial investment, then I don't know if personal property taxes should fund the same thing. So it would seem to me to be the case that those rates would probably be different because I'm assuming they would fund different things. I don't know if that works out to be the case in reality, but that would be my assumption.
Sometimes, okay, not every town, yeah.
Yeah. So I, in my opinion, I always think that tax rates should be set to achieve some funding end. And that's the only reason why tax rates should be set.
Okay. So that means that you would prefer that these taxes be tied to something.
Yeah.
All right. So let's try to think of something. So if a town oversees the administration of, say, like rail, like in New York City, they oversee the city itself has some discretion over what's happening at the rail system. And if a business comes in and that they are dependent on rail, then some of their taxes should be associated with that. Do I have that read correct?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. So like I think, or I haven't heard a good argument against it, but I think I like taxes that are tied into like things that make sense for them to be tied into.
So like tolls for a bridge.
Yes. Or like a gasoline tax for roads. Although those run into problems on their own, for instance, our inability to raise it or keep up with like increased mileage on vehicles and stuff. But I think I like those types of taxes that are tied to
Well,
that
I mean, from an
utility.
accounting perspective, the gas tax is less directly associated with the road itself, I would think. So, than say a toll, for example, because you're
Sure, yeah,
actually
tolls
using
are
the
like
road.
altered.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, tolls are altered directly. So gas taxes are, I mean, kind of like if you're using gasoline in a vehicle, you're probably driving on roads, right? Although I guess it's harder to tell specifically which roads. But yeah, like a gas tax, like a toll tax would be like. I think that generally I like those types of taxes, but obviously depending on how specific you get, those things can be very regressive very quickly. So that's something that you kind of have to keep an eye out for as well. Yeah, it would just depend. Yeah. But I guess like those types of locally applied taxes don't necessarily have to be flat either. They could scale with income as well.
Scale with income or scale with other things.
Well, with anything theoretically, it could scale with anything.
So you're not
But like for
necessarily
instance, it's
wedded
it's
to income.
it doesn't have to be income. It could be other things. Income is generally what we go by. But for instance, like you could have a toll road, like a toll tax, and when you go through the toll, it's possible that if you make $1 million a year, your toll is $100, and if you make $1,000 a year, I don't know what job your toll would be like 10 cents or something, right? That it's possible that you could have like a local tax like that could still be progressive. Yeah.
All right. I'd love to get into your hierarchy of taxes in terms of which ones you prefer, generally speaking. But let's stick specifically with property taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's your thought on? Let's talk. Speculative property ownership is something I have in my notes here to ask you about. So, in
Okay.
terms of the use of a property, in terms of the necessary use of the property, do you think that how a property is actually used rather than how a property is potentially used should make a
Mm-hmm.
difference in how it's taxed?
It seems to be that it would have to. Yeah.
How would you go about
Um,
that?
So it seems to be the case that right now in the United States, we zone areas in pretty specific ways and we construct cities in pretty specific ways, such that the city is constructed in accordance with zoning laws, or zoning laws rather are given in accordance with how a city is constructed. So if you were, for instance, to have like 100 houses that were all built and then everything was zoned as like a residential district and everything, and then all of those houses were sectioned off inside and turned into hotels, that would cause some level of disruption in that city that would be negative. And though then
That
like different
sounds pretty
restrictions.
NIMBY, dude. That sounds like
um
you're heading towards NIMBYism there, dude.
no, I don't think so.
No.
No, I don't think so. I think that like, well, so to
Well,
be
all
very
right. Well,
clear.
let's answer this
Oh,
question.
wait, here, wait, real quick, real
All
quick, real
right.
quick.
All right.
I'm working within our current understanding, I think, of like American zoning, where we have like these three separate concepts of like residential, industrial, and commercial. I don't think it's necessarily or ultra NIMBY of me to say that if somebody were to buy like 3 houses, demolish them all, and then build like a small like coal factory in a neighborhood, I guess if that's an NIMBY, then sure. But like, I think that that's probably not the intended use of property, and it's going to cause some damage to the city because of how we zone things. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that just seems like a take on zoning rather than the way it's taxed in general.
Yeah, but like I feel like I feel like these two things have to kind of go hand in hand, right? That if property is meant to be used in a certain way and a city is constructed around it, then the revenues and everything we raise from it are probably going to be. This is all going to be kind of tied together, right?
Yeah. So the
Would my
question I was going to follow up that with, and I think is probably easier for you to answer to get at the root of this.
Mhm.
Do you think there are some usages that are necessarily more favorable, and either economically or however you want to look at favorable to a community?
Are there some uses of land that are more favorable, or uses of a tax
Usage of the land of the property.
that are more favorable to communities? Yeah, there must be, right?
So do you think that there should be some sort of downward adjustment, if you will, in the property taxes levied in certain cases where where the usage is significantly more favorable, or even just like a temporary thing to encourage that type of usage?
Um, yeah, I don't think I intrinsically have any problems with using like subsidies or tax policy even to incentivize or disincentivize certain things or behaviors. Yeah.
Okay, so in the case of, let's say, like I live in a town that's really hurting for industry. So if we
Okay.
had if we had let's take this to its logical end, a let's say 2-year full on waiver, not a deferral, full on waiver of property taxes as a way of encouraging businesses to come in. Is that something you'd necessarily be opposed to?
So this is going to be very unsatisfying for you. I don't have a good answer for this. I just truly don't know what the answer is. So intuitively, it feels to me like, yeah, that'd be cool if you incentivize businesses to move to your area.
When you need them.
By Yeah, when you need them. So one external thing that's kind of created from this, one problem I have with this, or seem to have with this, is that it feels like this can turn into a race to the bottom sometimes, where larger corporate entities that are like where larger corporate entities are basically benefiting from a whole bunch of cities like bending over backwards to fuck themselves in order to lure that business to their town. So the two examples that I can think of are, one is every single time I remember living in Omaha, it feels like every single time they're talking about building a new stadium, every city's like, yeah, but we'll build it here. We're not going to tax anything. Like, you can have the land for free. We'll give you maximum tax subsidies. And like all of these cities are bending over backwards to build these stadiums for free for these like multi-billion-dollar huge companies, huge organizations that are making tons of money or whatever. Like, do they really need those tax incentives? Or when companies like, say, Amazon, I know that in New York, famously, it might have even been in AOC's district, but I know that she championed a lot of people basically chasing a potential new Amazon warehouse or office or whatever from being constructed in New York because they didn't want to race to the bottom on taxes. And on one end, I see, well, that's bad because now you just chased off like business and growth and new tax revenue and everything for your city. But then on the other hand, I see the problem of like every city racing to the bottom to try to compete with each other to lure business to them by basically getting rid of like their taxes.
Does that necessarily have to be the case though?
It seems like that would be the logical.
Because I'm not seeing if this is mostly a political position to hold, right? Mm-hmm. If there's some sort of polemic, some sort of, one side of the aisle is going to be in favor of these incentives and one side is not. If they're both in favor of these incentives, and I don't see why that would, if it lent itself to destroying cities by doing that, then mm-hmm. you would see these people flee from many cities. No, there would be some sort of flight.
Well, I mean, like the destruction is probably hidden in a lot of ways, right? Like you can offload problems onto certain parts of your society and then nobody thinks much of it. So go ahead.
Well, what I mean is that it's not something like it's a deliberate choice. So for example, if you have an area like Detroit in the early 2000s, right? Mm-hmm. Where you had unemployment rates that just went completely through the roof. And because there's no employment there, what's the single best predictor for interstate migration? Jobs. So, mm-hmm. That's why people move across state lines. So when you have huge amounts of people saying, well, I need a job. Look, there's a job over there. I'm going to go get that job. I mean, that wouldn't be somebody saying, I'm leaving because the city destroyed itself with its property tax basis.
Yeah.
But that's still a causal effect of doing that.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm not sure that would necessarily be the case. I'm not sure that you would destroy every city in America if
probably not destroy them. I don't think you would outwardly like destroy them, but you would like start to cause problems that would show up in other parts of the system then that you would have to like shore up in other ways.
Okay, so I think there's just a fundamental disagreement on how we're looking at this rather than our actual responses here. Because my way of thinking is I don't know that there's going to be a race to the bottom. I just don't see how that would be the case in every single town. I think you'd see if there were towns that decided to do races to the bottom and it destroyed them, mm-hmm. then those people would move out of those towns to other towns where there isn't a race to the bottom. And then at some point, if that town's going to come back, then there's going to be these policies that aren't races to the bottom as you've described them. I don't see how that would completely take over the country.
So I'll follow this for a second, because I might agree with you. So let's say, for instance, that setting these tax rates in such a way is actually disadvantageous to a city. So cities start doing it, large companies move in, the company sets up shop, and then in a year or two or three, there's these massive problems that crop up. Or it seems like things can either go one of two ways. Either one, massive problems crop up, in which case cities won't race to the bottom anymore because they'll see that it's not worth it. Or two, even though they did lower the tax code to bring this company in, there was so much, business interest and jobs and creation and everything that happened that whatever negative problems existed as a result of that tax not being there, they were able to make it up in other ways. So in either case, it should work itself out a bit, essentially is what you're saying, right?
Well, I mean, in some cases. So I'll give you an example of what you're talking about. Let's say that by offering all of these incentives, you flood the area with people. And then when you flood the area with people, you need more services to service those people. One of those is the police. So you would presumably need more police to police an area. I would imagine that you agree with me that 8 people living in a town versus 8 million people in a town, you're going to need a larger police force for the other one, right? So if you wind up doing things like not being able to provide a funding mechanism for some fairly basic duties of a municipality, like covering its police department,
Mm-hmm.
and it results in tremendously high crime rates because there's just no way to police the streets. And we're
Mm-hmm.
working within this hypothetical, so I'm not, saying that
Yeah.
this is necessarily the case in a specific place. But if that's the case, then what winds up happening is, prices for everything will tend to go up as crime rates go up. It just costs more to do business in those communities. So,
Mm-hmm.
and you know that because insurance on these buildings is going to go through the roof, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And those buildings those businesses wind up either employing fewer people or closing up shop, or people just say, I don't want to live in this rundown, crime infested community, something
Mm-hmm.
along those lines. And you wind up getting people leaving that city
Mm-hmm.
for a place that will necessarily not be having these policies. That's I think what we're describing here.
Gotcha. So in the hypothetical, I think I would agree with you. I don't know if real life like complicates that or obfuscates that in such a way that cities still destroy themselves, but they don't notice it's because of business. So I think so. I will hesitantly agree with you. I think, yeah.
Okay.
I think I'll agree with you.
Before you hesitantly agree with me, is this
Yeah.
something that could be empirically proved or disproved?
Yeah, that's what it would have. That would come down to, I guess, right? Yeah.
So
When cities make, so I like the study would be something like if a city makes a sacrifice in its tax policy or whatever, or in some other way incentivize the business to move to its area, after 5, 10, 15 years, do we see overall the fiscal and economic impact was positive such that it outweighed any detrimental impacts?
okay, so this is going to have to be taken on an individual basis. This seems like a really this seems like something that would be really difficult to research in the first place.
I mean, no, there must be. If we look at like, is it EBR, Economic Bureau of Research? There must be like businesses.
NBER, I think it's National Bureau of Economic Research. Yeah.
Economic Bureau of Research, National Bureau of Economic. Oh, NBER. You're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
NBER, business tax incentive. There must be. I haven't looked for it before. But there must be
Because
I feel like
the way you described this before was that if there is a net benefit to providing this tax incentive, then there is a net benefit to providing this tax incentive, and it must be taken on a case by case basis. Do I have that read correctly?
it must be taken on a case by case basis. Well, I mean, I would imagine there'd probably be like a general rule of thumb that like having like certain businesses move to areas provides so much benefit that like it just is beneficial would be my guess. Like there's going to be like a general rule there, I would imagine.
Right. So in the case of like Amazon, right? Like there's a city in my area that put together a little ad just saying like, hey, come to our city. Here's all the reasons to come to our city. And the municipal tax incentives they were offering were pretty minimal. And it would have brought in, I think that the site that they were looking at, they estimated between 50 and 100,000 jobs based on the site's capacity for what Amazon was looking to do. And for a city of that size, that would have been a huge windfall to just like completely waive their first year's taxes. So, like I said, I don't know that the study would be a simple direct correlation, right? Like as soon as if we look to a community, are they giving incentives at all versus are they giving no incentives?
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I don't think that it's going to scale perfectly either. You know what I mean? Like if we have a $1 incentive, it might actually be better to give $100 incentive, but also worse to give $1,000 incentive.
Yeah, there's going to be like some function there, or
and
some curve.
It's not going to be linear. It's going to be some weird, That's what I would think. Anyways.
And it's probably going to be like tailored very specifically to the type of industry coming in, and then the type of the place you're moving to. It's probably going to be relatively unique, right? So like making big tax cuts to bring some fishing industry into a city that has like harbors or whatever, might have special challenges or whatever. Like, I imagine all of that is going to be like pretty difficult to figure out. But
that's why I said with these studies, like I don't know how you'd go about empirically proving that, evidencing that claim.
Yeah, I guess
either way.
I guess you would have to do like, I guess it would be a case study. You'd go on a case by case basis and see like in general. Like,
which is kind of what I was saying. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, you're correct. Yeah.
Okay. So, I don't know that we have much more to go into unless you want to go into greater detail on Prop 13. Because here's where it stands, Steve. It sounds like you and I, our takes, generally speaking, the 30,000 foot view on property taxes is kind of in line. That it would be nice to not have it, but we live in Earth in 2020, so we have to have it.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like we kind of agree that where it's reasonable to do so, it should be devolved to the lowest common level. It
Mm-hmm.
seems like in terms of the process of establishing the mill rate, we kind of agree that there should be that a direct democracy on this is probably not the best way to go, and also you don't want to just have it arbitrarily set by some unilateral body.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think our disagreement is going to come from a useless nitpicking of what the rate should actually be in a specific community. Please interrupt me if you think I'm not describing your take accurately.
No, I mean, I think it lines up pretty well. Or at least based on what I've heard you say so far. I don't know. I haven't heard you give too many like opinionated things.
Well,
You're telling me that you agree with what I said, so I'm assuming that you agree with it. But
well, our 30,000 foot, I think our 30,000 foot take is in line.
Okay, yeah,
Right, and
probably,
it's going to be tough for us to, unless I lived if I lived right down the block from you, maybe we could have a real good back and forth about the specific nuance of the mill rate that's happening. I forget where you said you lived. Huntington Beach. Right. Sorry, yeah. If we and unfortunately, if you lived where I live, we could have a very specific, nuanced look into the actual rate itself. It doesn't seem like our a prioristic positions are very different.
Yeah. So if we're like morally in line, then assuming that we should line up 100%, assuming both of us are like rational people that believe like in like deductive reasoning. Because I would imagine, assuming our 30,000 vote is correct, it would just come at like reviewing the evidence, seeing which tax rates accomplish our end goals optimally. And I think our end goals are similar, that we should be funded, or maybe we would disagree on like what public program should be funded. But in terms of how tax rates should be set, it sounds like we would be lining up.
Yeah. Oh, how about this one? How about this one then? The way you reduce tax rate isn't to just reduce the tax rate. It's to, to reduce, let's say the municipal level. The way you reduce the rate itself, the mill rate itself, isn't to just arbitrarily reduce the rate. It's to reduce, let's say, a cost basis, so that you don't have to have the mill rate be so high.
Can you explain what you mean by that?
Okay, so there's two ways to reduce the mill rate, and that is to just say we're going to reduce the mill rate and we're going to run at a deficit, let's say. Or let's say we were running at a surplus last year, so we're just going to lower the mill rate to get down to a break-even point.
Okay.
Do you agree that generally...
Are you talking like fiscally, like on a state budget or a local budget or something?
A local budget, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
So we're not... Actually, is $0 black? I think $0 is that black? Or is that
call
red?
It 1 cent. But go ahead.
Yeah, 1 cent, just we call it. So you remain in that 1 cent in the black. Yeah. So the better way to approach reducing taxes isn't to just lower the tax rate. It's to find things in the budget that can be maneuvered so you don't need as high a tax rate.
Gotcha. It would still involve you eventually lowering the tax rate though, right?
Right. If you wanted to lower it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you agree that if there are ways to lower a tax rate that don't have
detrimental impacts on society, you ought to do that, right?
Yes. That's exactly where I was going with this. So we shouldn't look to just lower the tax rate. We should be looking to do the things that allow us to lower the tax rate rather than just lowering the tax rate. Because there are things that we can do to lower it that are terrible, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure, 100%. Hypothetically, if we found out that there was like a more efficient way to educate children such that they only needed 4 years of elementary school instead of 8, this is completely hypothetical, but like that would be a way that we could severely reduce our education spending, hopefully without reducing like how educated our citizens are, whatever. Something like that would be like reducing like how much money we're spending rather than just arbitrarily cutting a tax that we're collecting or something, right? And then we would pair a tax cut with that, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be kind of difficult here in Connecticut, where you're not allowed to actually reduce the budget year to year for the Board of Education, which makes no sense to me.
That's right.
Yeah, you agree with that, right? If you have half as many kids in the system, obviously there's fixed costs that you can't do anything about.
Yeah, it should lower by some percentage. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, welcome to Connecticut, where you're not allowed to do that. So.
Those must be awesome schools then if all the kids start leaving.
Believe it or not, actually, if you want to look it up, Connecticut has some of the highest rated public schools in the country. I mean, it's been going down over the last 10 years, but it routinely ranks in the top 5 overall. I'm sure you can look that up.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I guess, do you have anything else you want to chat about, I guess, in regards to this? Or you said you wanted to plug something at the end? I don't know if you were running for something.
Oh, no. Just telling folks in general. I know this might have been a boring conversation, but like your local your local elections are happening also in November 3rd in some
Mhm.
cases, and they're necessarily more impactful than what's going to be happening in the presidential race. So
Yeah.
you've got 4 days. I'm sure everyone knows who they're voting for in the
Mhm.
presidential races. Very few people are informed when it comes to local politics. Again, I'm
Mhm.
sorry if this was a boring conversation because me and Steve didn't disagree on much. Um, but like, do spend some time going online, reading up on your local elected officials because it's so much more impactful. Um,
Yeah.
all right.
All right,
Well,
cool. Awesome.
I wish we had more to disagree about, but
All right. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. Have a good day.
all right. See you,
If
Steve.
you ever want to talk about anything else, you can always just reach out and let me know. Okay. All
All right. See you, man.
right. Bye.
All right. Just going to mute myself. Yeah. So that seems like I'm kind of actually on the brink of walking Destiny kind of back from some of the more leftist perspectives he takes. I would have loved to have gotten into more of his general views of taxation. I kind of look at it as a necessary evil. It seems like he's describing it from a very utilitarian perspective, so that would be a necessary evil. Again, I know it's property taxes. People, I know it's boring. I know it's boring. And I'm sure Destiny was basically falling asleep playing Minesweeper, Minecraft. But like, this is stuff you actually have to keep yourself informed on. And again, I think that he and I are not going to agree when it comes to more specific nuance in this sort of thing. But again, I don't know how you would have that conversation if we're not both very familiar um, with each other's local tax policy. So let's see if I can hop in on the chat here. I'm sure I got a lot of people that were joining in just saying like, who is this weirdo? Who's just nobody with barely 200 subscribers. Yep. Who is this? It's Destiny. No, I'm sure they're talking. Whoever Rich is talking about me. No. Who the fuck is Captain Phoenix and why is he speaking with Destiny? Because I reached out to him via email. Folks, if you're online, you want to reach out to, if you actually want to chat with Destiny, just be cordial, be decent, be reasonable, and email him. He and I, when it comes to national stuff, are probably going to disagree on everything. Trump's handling of the coronavirus, who to vote for in general, Biden's take on economic policy and foreign policy. We're probably going to disagree on a lot of those things. But I wanted to talk specifically about property taxes because it sounded like he really wasn't familiar with the process, at least where he is. And I kind of am. So it was just something I was interested in. And I wanted to chat with him because, again, I think I was able to, in some respects, kind of walk him back from certain more left-leaning takes that he could have taken. I also think it's a topic that I don't know that he's really discussed all that much. So maybe I'll join him again to talk about something that we actually disagree about fundamentally. I thought there would be more room for disagreement. There wasn't much disagreement. Glad you're talking to up and coming streamers like Destiny. He's on the road getting partnered and could use the boost. Yeah, I get it. Dabs, low. No, your conversation was really interesting. Oh, cool. Thanks for joining in. I hope you got something out of this conversation on local tax policy. Hey, dude, nice talk. Francis, thank you so much for joining in. Again, election in November. I'm glad that he was willing to have this conversation so close to the election too, because folks, there are more people that are going to be on the ballot than Trump and Biden, and George Jorgensen. Your local level, there's probably going to be right now. We have the state senate races that are happening right now in my town, and man, the guy that's running against the guy that's the incumbent is terrible. We had him as our mayor previously, and so it's yeah, and unfortunately, I don't know if the rest of the people in the Senate district know who this guy is, and we've been trying to get out in force and let people know just who this guy is. Not saying you shouldn't vote for him, but like, here's video evidence. Here's what town council meetings look like when this guy was our mayor. Like, you really don't want him running for state senate. And the other thing is that we have our state congressional district is up for re-election too. We have 2 congressional districts in my town. Hopefully that doesn't dox me too hard. And yeah, the guy that's the incumbent in my district, really love him. The person that's coming in is a crazy leftist. I mean, like full on loon bag, SJW. You don't want her. You don't want her in Hartford. This state is already backwards enough when it comes to state level policy. We don't need any more of that. We do need somebody like the guy I'm going to be voting for, standing in the way of idiotic things like telling the sole utility company that's allowed to come to Connecticut, because we've for some reason deliberately created a monopoly in that market, that they're going to have to cap their salary for their CEO at $350,000. That is insane. That is insane. The utility company that's in my state is a multinational, multi-billion-dollar firm. Straight up, no one is at the executive level is taking $350K a year, and we're not going to have somebody to distribute electricity in our state. Either that, or you're going to be having some nobody's ever heard of. When the real solution here is to just get rid of the monopoly that the utilities have, the local utility company has over the provision of electricity, the delivery of electricity in our state. So yeah, so these are way more impactful positions than president, which is one of the nice things about this country. Happy was an enjoyable talk. Great. That was Roasted Toast, whoever you are. Yeah. I'm sure you guys are all saying, whoever you are, Mike. Yeah. I in that conversation, I kind of wanted to troll the DGG chat by calling myself Mike from CT. I'm sure that would have pissed off plenty of folks who know who Mike from PA is. And it probably would not have been as cordial a conversation, if you will. So, all right, that was fun. I actually have a thing I have to go to. So everyone who's joined in, thanks for joining in. Don't be afraid to subscribe and check out all the videos that have. Damn you, Kungan250. Damn, you should have done that. We would have enjoyed that meme. Roasted Toast. You should left my half house. You should have. We love those memes. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe the next time I come in, I'll come in hot and say, "Hey, Tiny," something along those lines, and introduce myself as Mike from CT. So, anyways, it's been fun. It's been nice. I got a thing I got to go to very shortly here. So thanks for joining in. Please feel free to peruse my videos. Please feel free to subscribe, and of course, ding that notification bell. And hopefully, we'll see you in the next one. Bye, everybody.